The film Superman Returns opens with the legend of a hero the world once relied on completely. Superman was that symbol of hope, someone people believed would always be there when disaster struck. But one day, without warning or explanation, he vanished from Earth. No farewell, no trace, just silence. And over time, the world moved on without him. Years later, he finally comes back. But nothing is the same anymore. Humanity has learned to survive without its protector, and the emotional gap he left behind has slowly been filled with acceptance. Even the woman he once loved has built a new life, leaving the past behind. For Superman, returning home is not a celebration. It is a painful realization that he no longer fits into the world he once saved. At the same time, we shift to a grand mansion where an elderly, wealthy woman lies on her deathbed. Standing beside her is a calm, sharply dressed man whose presence feels unsettlingly cold. With calculated urgency, he ensures she signs important documents before she passes away. The moment she dies, everything becomes clear. He has legally secured her entire fortune, despite the objections of her family. And then the truth behind his identity is revealed. The man is Lex Luthor, a ruthless criminal mastermind with ambitions far beyond wealth. Meanwhile, in a quiet rural village, Martha Kent continues her simple life on the farm. Suddenly, the ground begins to tremble violently. A strange light fills the sky, and something massive crashes down nearby. Terrified but concerned, she rushes toward the impact site and discovers a gigantic crystal-like structure embedded deep in the earth, almost like something not of this world. Inside it lies Clark Kent, the son she raised, known to the world as Superman. After 5 long years of disappearance, he has returned. Elsewhere, Lex Luthor travels across the ocean with his assistants and his companion Kitty, heading toward the frozen Arctic. Their destination is something hidden from the world, a massive crystalline fortress buried in ice, known as the Fortress of Solitude. This is the place where Superman once learned about his origins and the truth of Krypton. Intrigued and opportunistic, Lex and his team enter the structure. Inside, they explore its alien design until Lex discovers a mysterious crystal console. When he activates it, a recorded message begins to play. It is the voice of Superman's biological father, revealing secrets about Krypton, Superman's abilities, and the powerful crystals that form this entire fortress. In that moment, Lex gains access to knowledge that was never meant for human hands. The next morning, Clark wakes up in his childhood room, everything around him unchanged as if time never moved forward. He quietly reconnects with his past, spending time on the farm and with his old dog, memories flooding back. One memory in particular resurfaces, his early struggles as a boy trying to understand his abilities. He once ran across fields faster than any human could imagine, jumped too high and lost control in midair. Just as he thought he was falling, something impossible happened. He stopped, suspended in the sky, untouched by gravity. And in that moment, he discovered the truth about himself. He could fly. Clark returns to the present, sitting quietly in front of the television as breaking news flashes across the screen. Report after report shows disasters, accidents, and global tragedies that happened during the years he was gone. Cities suffered, lives were lost, and chaos spread across the world. And he wasn't there to stop any of it. Watching all this, Clark is clearly overwhelmed with guilt, realizing the weight of his absence. Soon after, he has a heartfelt conversation with his mother, Martha Kent. She asks him directly where he disappeared to for all those years. Clark finally opens up and explains that he traveled far beyond Earth in search of Krypton, hoping that someone from his kind might still be alive. But what he found was emptiness. No survivors, no civilization, only ruins. In the end, there was nothing left of his home world. That is what brought him back to Earth. He chose to return so he could take responsibility again and become Superman once more. After some time, Clark makes his way back to Metropolis and steps into the life he once left behind. He resumes his disguise as the quiet and awkward reporter working at the Daily Planet. There, he reunites with familiar faces, his energetic friend Jimmy Olsen and his strict editor Perry White, who still runs the newsroom with the same fiery attitude. But Clark's return to normal life doesn't last long. A crisis strikes in the sky when a passenger plane suddenly begins to malfunction mid-flight. Without hesitation, Superman springs into action. He reaches the aircraft just in time and stabilizes part of its wing, giving the passengers, including Lois Lane, a brief moment to secure themselves. However, the situation quickly escalates. One of the wings breaks apart under pressure, forcing Superman into a desperate struggle mid-air. He manages to recover, but the damage continues to worsen as the aircraft spirals downward. With no time left, he makes a bold decision, placing himself directly in front of the falling plane and using his own strength to slow its descent. Below them, a packed baseball stadium becomes the unexpected landing zone. Thousands of spectators watch in horror as the massive burning aircraft falls from the sky. Panic spreads instantly. Superman pushes himself beyond his limits, straining against the weight of the plane as he fights to control its descent. At the very last moment, just meters above the ground, he manages to bring it to a halt. Slowly and carefully, he lowers the aircraft into the center of the stadium, saving everyone inside. For a brief moment, there is absolute silence. Then the crowd erupts into cheers and applause as the world realizes something powerful. Their protector has returned. As the passengers begin to recover, Superman steps out of the wreckage and, after years of distance, comes face to face with Lois Lane once again. Superman and Lois stand frozen for a moment, silently looking at each other as if the entire world has disappeared around them. There is a deep emotional tension between them, filled with everything left unsaid over the years. But before anything can be expressed, Superman quietly turns away and flies off into the sky, leaving the moment unfinished. The emotional weight of the encounter hits Lois hard. Overwhelmed by everything that just happened, she suddenly collapses unconscious. Meanwhile, far away, Lex Luthor is watching the entire situation unfold on television. From what he sees, he realizes something crucial. This is not just the return of a hero. It is an opportunity. He understands that the small crystal fragment he discovered earlier is far more powerful than it appears. It holds advanced alien technology, capable of creating massive structures similar to the Fortress of Solitude. And with this knowledge, Lex begins developing a far more dangerous plan involving these crystals. Later, Lois regains consciousness and returns to the Daily Planet, where an important meeting is already underway. Perry White announces to the newsroom that Superman's return is the biggest story in the world right now, and every reporter is assigned to cover it. However, Lois is not fully focused on the official narrative. She is more concerned about the strange blackout incident and suspects that something much larger and more suspicious is happening beneath the surface. At the same time, Clark attempts to reconnect with Lois, but the situation becomes awkward and emotionally complicated. He soon finds himself introduced to Lois's new life, her young son Jason, and her fiancé Richard. The reality of her situation hits him hard, and he struggles to find the right words or place in her changed world. Later that night, Clark secretly returns in his Superman identity and quietly hovers outside Lois's home. Using his X-ray vision, he looks inside and sees her living peacefully with her family, smiling with her son and Richard. The sight creates a painful realization inside him. Lois has moved on, and there is no space left for him in her life anymore. Accepting this truth, Superman suppresses his emotions and silently flies away into the night sky. Once again, he focuses on his responsibility to protect the world. Using his super hearing, he scans the city for danger until he picks up a distress call, a bank robbery in progress. Armed criminals are attempting to break into a heavily secured vault, and when police arrive, the situation quickly escalates into a violent shootout. The criminals have superior firepower, and even security guards struggle to stop them. One of the attackers fires at point-blank range, but he is wearing a bulletproof vest, making him even more dangerous. Just as the situation reaches its peak, Superman arrives. He calmly steps in front of the bullets, completely unaffected. The gunfire bounces off him without causing any harm. Slowly, he walks toward the criminals as they continue firing in panic. Eventually, their ammunition runs out, leaving them helpless. In desperation, one of them even fires a pistol directly at Superman's face, but the bullet shatters instantly on impact without leaving a mark. The criminals are left in complete shock, realizing there is nothing they can do. At the same time, Lex Luthor continues preparing his next move. He visits a mineral exhibition with his associates, searching for a way to obtain kryptonite, the only known substance capable of weakening Superman. To execute his plan, he orders Kitty to drive through the city at high speed, but secretly sabotages the vehicle by disabling its brakes. The car quickly spirals out of control, causing chaos as it crashes through traffic, buildings, and streets. The situation becomes increasingly dangerous, eventually heading straight toward a couple sitting outside a restaurant. It seems like a tragic accident is about to happen, but just in time, the car suddenly lifts off the ground and comes to a halt in midair. Superman manages to arrive just in time and rescues the people from the speeding, out-of-control car, preventing a major tragedy. In the middle of all this chaos, Lex Luthor and his team take advantage of the distraction and successfully steal what they came for: kryptonite, the only known substance capable of weakening Superman. With this, Lex finally acquires the ultimate weapon he needs for his plan. The next day, Clark returns to the Daily Planet as usual. Perry White calls him into his office and assigns him to investigate the mysterious blackout incidents. At the same time, Lois is given the task of writing a major feature on Superman's return, but she shows little enthusiasm, still emotionally conflicted and distracted by her own suspicions. Later that night, Lois, her fiancé Richard, and Clark all remain at the office working late. When Lois steps outside for some fresh air, Clark sees an opportunity. He quickly changes into Superman and meets her privately. Lois is surprised but composed, and instead of panic, she begins asking him questions, almost like conducting an interview. She asks where he disappeared to for 5 years. Superman explains that he traveled to Krypton in search of his origins, hoping to find any trace of his people. But what he discovered was emptiness. Nothing remained of his world. In return, Superman questions Lois about an old article she wrote suggesting that the world no longer needed him. Lois calmly responds that during his absence, she had no choice but to move on with her life and accept that humanity could survive without him. Hearing this, Superman gently lifts her into the sky, and together they fly above the glowing city. From above, he tells her that every single day he hears people calling for help, cries that never stopped, even while he was gone. He makes it clear that the world still needs a protector, and that responsibility still belongs to him. They eventually return to the Daily Planet. In a quiet moment, Superman apologizes for disappearing without explanation. For a brief moment, it feels like the emotional distance between them might finally close. There is a softness in the air, as if things could return to what they once were, but Lois holds herself back. Despite her feelings, she chooses her current life with her family, stepping away from the past. Superman understands her decision without needing words. He realizes that the world has moved forward, and so has she. The next morning, he travels to the Fortress of Solitude, seeking answers and clarity. But upon arrival, he is met with a shocking discovery. The entire structure has been stripped. All the Kryptonian crystals are gone. Someone has stolen them. At that moment, he realizes the situation is far more serious than he ever imagined. Meanwhile, Lois prepares for an award ceremony, but her curiosity about the blackout never fades. Following a lead, she travels with her son Jason to a mysterious location that brings her to a massive yacht belonging to Lex Luthor. Unaware of the danger, she enters the vessel to investigate further. Inside, she finds something disturbing. Collections of wigs, disguises, and multiple identities, revealing that someone has been secretly changing appearances and manipulating situations for a long time. Realization hits her. Everything is connected to Lex Luthor, but before she can escape, the yacht suddenly detaches and begins moving away from the harbor. Trapped inside, Lois and Jason are taken captive. Soon after, Lex reveals himself and brings them into the main room, calmly unveiling his entire plan. He explains that he intends to use the Kryptonian crystals to create a new landmass in the ocean, an artificial continent that will reshape the world map. This new land will destroy existing nations, cost countless lives, and ultimately be sold off to governments, allowing him to build a global empire under his control. Lois is horrified and insists that Superman will stop him, but Lex simply smiles and reveals something far more terrifying: pure kryptonite. The sight shocks her completely. At the same time, Jason reacts strangely to its presence, and Lex immediately becomes suspicious. He begins to suspect that Jason may be more than just a child, that he could be Superman's son. Without hesitation, Lex orders his men to lock Lois and Jason in a secure room. Now, both are trapped inside his ship, completely under his control. With everything in place, Lex moves forward with the final stage of his plan, placing a crystal inside a kryptonite container and launching it deep into the ocean as part of his larger operation. Meanwhile, Lois tries to stay calm, fully aware that things are about to escalate beyond anything she expected. Lois quickly tells Jason to move into the other room and play the piano, hoping to distract the guards' attention. As expected, one of the guards follows the child, giving Lois a brief but crucial opening. Without wasting a second, she activates an emergency distress signal and sends it directly to the Daily Planet, hoping someone will pick it up. Meanwhile, Lex Luthor proceeds with his plan. Moments later, he launches the missile carrying the Kryptonian crystal combined with kryptonite. As it enters the ocean depths, an intense surge of energy erupts underwater. The fusion of alien crystal technology and kryptonite triggers an unpredictable reaction, rapidly escalating in power. Almost instantly, another massive blackout hits the entire city. Electricity fails everywhere, plunging Metropolis into chaos. Inside the yacht, Lois remains trapped. She attempts to operate nearby systems to escape or send another signal, but she is quickly interrupted when the guard realizes what she has done. He attacks her without hesitation. Lois fights back with everything she has, but she is clearly overpowered. The situation becomes more dangerous as Jason watches in fear from the side. Just as the guard moves in to finish the confrontation, something unexpected awakens within Jason. In a moment of sudden strength, he lifts a heavy piano, far beyond what a normal child should be able to handle, and hurls it directly at the attacker. The piano crashes into the man with immense force, pinning him against the wall and knocking him out instantly. The remaining guards are stunned. It becomes clear to them that Jason is not an ordinary child. Elsewhere, Clark and Richard are desperately trying to locate Lois in the city, but the massive blackout has crippled all communication systems, making tracking nearly impossible. Suddenly, power is restored, and Lois's emergency signal finally comes through, revealing her exact location. Without hesitation, Richard rushes toward an aircraft to reach her, while Clark takes a different path. In an empty elevator, Clark steps inside. As the doors close, he quickly changes into Superman and launches into the sky, flying straight toward the ocean. But during his flight, he witnesses something terrifying. Giant void-like openings forming across the sea surface, with massive structures rising from beneath the water. For a brief moment, he is torn between two choices: save Lois or respond to the larger global threat emerging before him. After a moment of hesitation, he chooses to protect the city first and redirects toward Metropolis. When he arrives, destruction has already begun. A powerful earthquake shakes the entire city, sending shockwaves through the streets and buildings. Glass shatters everywhere as panic spreads. Superman immediately begins rescue operations. He saves a worker who is falling from a collapsing crane, catching him just in time. He moves rapidly through the chaos, pulling civilians to safety one by one. A large metal billboard breaks loose and crashes toward a line of cars, but Superman stops it mid-air before it can cause casualties. However, the disaster continues to escalate. A man accidentally drops a lit cigarette into a manhole at the exact moment an underground gas line ruptures due to the quake. Within seconds, a massive explosion erupts. Reacting instantly, Superman rushes toward the blast zone, determined to contain the damage and save as many lives as possible. Superman uses his heat vision mid-air to destroy a collapsing structure before it can cause further destruction, but the danger is far from over. He soon discovers that the explosion has triggered a fire spreading through an underground tunnel system, heading directly toward a factory filled with highly flammable materials. Without wasting a second, he dives into the tunnel. The heat and smoke intensify as he reaches the center of the blaze, but he uses his super breath to completely extinguish the fire, stopping another disaster just in time. However, while one crisis is contained, another immediately unfolds. At the Daily Planet building, the massive globe mounted on top begins to crack loose and falls toward the ground. Superman reacts instantly, arriving just in time to catch it before it crashes, saving countless lives, including Perry White, who was dangerously close to the impact zone. Meanwhile, Lex Luthor learns that Jason has managed to overpower one of his men. Realizing the situation is slipping out of control, he decides to abandon the operation. He escapes with Kitty and his crew via helicopter, leaving Lois and Jason trapped aboard the sinking yacht. Jason once again attempts to break free using his strength. But before he can succeed, Richard arrives in a small aircraft. He bravely enters the yacht and manages to rescue both Lois and Jason, pulling them out of immediate danger. However, the situation worsens rapidly. The unstable Kryptonian crystal in the ocean begins to grow uncontrollably, generating massive energy waves. It rises from the sea and collides with the yacht, splitting it into two halves. Water rushes in violently as the wreckage begins to sink. Lois, Jason, and Richard become trapped in one section of the collapsing vessel. They struggle desperately to escape, but the doors seal shut. During the chaos, Lois is struck on the head and loses consciousness. Richard manages to hold both her and Jason together, but the flooding continues, and escape seems impossible. Just in time, Superman arrives. Using his full strength, he lifts the sinking wreckage out of the water and carries all three to safety. He transports them to the aircraft and ensures they are secure before setting them down safely. For a moment, Lois and her family are finally out of danger. With them safe, Superman turns his attention to the true threat, the massive crystal landmass rising from the ocean. There, he confronts Lex Luthor directly. Superman demands that he shut everything down and return the crystals, but Lex responds with violence, striking him with a powerful blow that sends him crashing back. To Superman's shock, he quickly realizes something is terribly wrong. The entire landmass is made of kryptonite. His strength begins to fade rapidly. Lex takes full advantage of this weakness, launching a brutal attack. Punch after punch lands, and Superman is unable to defend himself. He struggles to rise, but his powers are draining completely. Lex's men join in, surrounding him and continuing the assault. Superman is overwhelmed, thrown down repeatedly, unable to fight back as his strength disappears under the influence of kryptonite. The attack on Superman becomes even more brutal as Lex's men push him beyond his limits, even attempting to drown him in the ocean. The situation is cruel and merciless. The very hero who has always saved others is now completely powerless and struggling for his life. Watching this, Kitty finally feels uneasy and tells Lex to stop the torture. But Lex, consumed by obsession and control, refuses to listen. He escalates the violence further by grabbing a piece of kryptonite and hurling it directly into Superman's back. Superman cries out in pain, already weakened and now pushed even closer to collapse. Despite trying to resist, his strength completely fails him. Unable to endure it any longer, he falls from the collapsing edge of the structure and plunges into the sea below. In the water, he desperately tries to pull himself together and remove the kryptonite embedded in his body, but his powers are almost gone. Slowly, he begins to sink, drowning under the weight of his weakness. Meanwhile, Lois and the others are escaping in the plane, but Lois refuses to leave Superman behind. She insists that Richard turn the aircraft back immediately. Despite the danger, they return to search for him. Jason spots Superman struggling in the water, and Lois immediately rushes to help. Together, they manage to pull him out and bring him onto the plane just in time.
Richard struggles to stabilize the aircraft, but a violent storm makes flying extremely difficult. The plane shakes violently as it begins to lose control in the sky. The situation worsens when the aircraft is dragged toward a massive waterfall-like drop in the turbulent energy field. It begins to descend uncontrollably. At the last possible moment, Richard regains control and manages to pull the plane upward. Inside, Lois quickly examines Superman's condition and discovers the kryptonite still lodged in his back. With shaking hands, she carefully removes it using a tool. Once the fragment is finally extracted and shattered, Superman slowly regains consciousness. He is alive again, but there is no time to rest. With renewed determination, Superman thanks Lois and prepares to face the threat once more. He leaves the plane and flies directly toward the sun. Absorbing its energy, his strength returns rapidly as he is fully recharged. Now restored, he returns at incredible speed and dives deep into the oceanic structure. Using his regained power, he creates a massive shockwave that begins breaking apart the kryptonite-based landmass from below. On the surface, Lex and his team believe they have already won. But suddenly, the entire structure begins to shake violently. Massive cracks spread across the artificial continent. Lex immediately realizes Superman is still alive and orders his men to evacuate. Panic breaks out as they rush toward the helicopter. However, before they can escape, a giant crystal formation collapses, crushing several of his men instantly. Only Lex and Kitty manage to escape narrowly, reaching the helicopter just in time as chaos erupts all around them. Lex hurriedly hands the crystal over to Kitty, but in a surprising turn of events, she suddenly rejects his entire plan. Without warning, Kitty throws the crystal away, leaving Lex completely stunned. He tries to stop her, but it's already too late. The source of his entire ambition is gone. With everything collapsing around him, Lex barely manages to escape the destruction alongside Kitty. As they flee, they look back and witness an unbelievable sight in the distance. Superman, despite his weakened state, is lifting the massive crystalline landmass with sheer willpower and strength. Refusing to give in to kryptonite poisoning, he pushes himself beyond his limits. In one final act of determination, he carries the entire structure upward and launches it into space, saving the Earth from complete destruction. With the threat finally over, Superman collapses unconscious. Lois rushes to his side, overwhelmed by emotion, and finally reveals the truth she had been holding back. Jason is her son, and Superman is his father. After saying this, she says a painful goodbye, believing this may be the last time she sees him. Jason also says goodbye, unaware that the man lying before him is actually his real father. Far away, Lex and Kitty attempt to escape, but their helicopter runs out of fuel mid-air. They crash land on a remote deserted island, their grand plan completely destroyed, leaving them stranded and powerless. Back at the hospital, a nurse checks Superman's room, but finds it empty. He has vanished without a trace. Sometime later, he quietly arrives at Lois's home. Inside, Lois is writing a letter, still questioning whether the world truly needs Superman. Without making a sound, Superman enters Jason's room. The boy sleeps peacefully as Superman sits beside him. In a quiet, emotional moment, he whispers words of wisdom, echoes of the lessons once taught to him by his own father. a message about hope, responsibility, and protecting life. He then steps outside. Lois is standing alone. Seeing him alive brings her relief, and she softly asks if she will ever see him again. Superman smiles and replies that he is always there, even if unseen. With that, he rises into the sky once more. No longer just a hero of strength, but a silent guardian watching over the world. A protector who carries Earth as his home. And with that, Superman Returns comes to an end. A story not only of power, but of love, sacrifice, and responsibility.